Okay, getting back into part 2 of module 1 of reading from this test here. We just finished the vocab 1 through 7, and now we get into the reading problems. The reading problems are going to take up, 8 to 12 questions in between before we jump to grammar. So if we go into number 8 here, this one shouldn't be too bad, the first reading problem. It looks like we have a poem, and let's make this a little bit bigger. So, go forth, my son, so a father talking to his son. Wing my heart's desire, great reaches yet unknown. So to aspire to these great things. Retrace the way, my pilgrimage is through. So like he's saying like the father, like his job is done, his path is done, but you should continue on and live your life, So if I look through my answers here, to express hope starts off good, that a child will have the same accomplishments. So that's very specific, and you almost want to give that negative context. Like you would almost hope your child would do more or experience more, never like the same, right? And we just don't have enough evidence for that. For B, to suggest that raising a child involves struggle, we see no negative in this passage. To warn, no negative. And then I see D, to encourage a child to embrace the experiences life will offer. 100% one-to-one answer. Good. And then if we want to try number 9, this one's going to be a little hard because it's, the text is very long, but we'll go through the passage and then look at the answers. So it's adapted from this memoir. Okay. Right there, how women in the tribe harvested maple syrup during his childhood. Okay. So the women begin to test the trees, moving leisurely among them. Leisurely kind of like in like a chill kind of way, right? Kind of relaxed kind of way. Axe in hand and striking in a single quick blow to see if the sap would appear. And then here's the main part of the passage. They want us to understand the underlined part. The trees, like people, a little bit of personification, have their individual character. Some were ready to yield up the sap, while others were more reluctant. So they want to know how does the underlined portion kind of function for the rest of the passage. So it portrays the range of personality traits displayed by the women. I don't think so. It was the subject was the trees, right? It foregrounds the beneficial relationship between humans and trees. That's just kind of like a really weird answer. Again, it just kind of talks about the trees a little bit and how some are easier to get sap from than the others. It demonstrates how human behavior can be influenced by the natural environment. Again, I don't really see this one. See down below in letter D. It elaborates on an aspect of the maple trees that the women evaluate. So these ones are almost easier to contrast, right? Maybe you're a little confused reading through B and C, but once you see D, it's so easy to cross those out because the subject in B is saying between the humans and the maple trees. This is a description of maple trees, right? Our subject is maple trees. So our subject's not both. How human behavior, our subject's not human behavior. D, the subject is our maple trees, right? So again, pretty easy intro to the reading questions on this test. Let's see what we got next in 10. We got 2 texts. Okay. So how we always analyze these 2 text passages, they're rare. I think there's only like 2 or 3 of them on these practice tests. You always want to get a theme, a tone from passage 1, negative, positive, neutral, and then a theme of 2, because it's always going to be how they interact, right? If I know text 1 is positive and text 2 is negative, I know it's going to be like criticize, etc., right? So let's look at 1. Have long wondered how thousands of these species can live together near the ocean surface, because they're all competing with each other, right? According to conventional wisdom, which would be like according to common sense, one species should emerge after out-competing, right? So if we have a bunch of these different groups, eventually one should kind of win in this competition for food, right? So why do so many species remain? Many efforts to explain this haven't uncovered. So this is where I want to try to give it like a neutral sign. So it's not going to be positive. It's not going to be negative. I'll kind of write both because it's kind of neutral. They thought it was this. Why is it this? We kind of have this inconclusive conclusion, right? Let's see what text 2 says. So text 2 says, they have connected their diversity to their microscopic size. So diversity meaning like, why are there still so many groups as opposed to one group? Because they are so tiny, they are spaced relatively far apart. And the water is a relatively dense substance. This in turn makes it hard for them to move around and interact. Therefore, direct competition between them really doesn't happen often. So this is giving insight to the kind of confusion that was occurring in text 1. So now that we have that absorbed, I scroll down to the question part, and they say, based on the text, how would text 2 respond to text 1? Or that conventional wisdom where, well, if there's a bunch of groups competing, one's eventually going to win. And we know how to respond to this. We know that they're just too far apart to compete with each other. So I look through, let me just make sure. Okay. So I look through and I see by arguing that it is based on a misconception about the plankton species competing with one another. So again, so far that sounds good. The misconception would be that they are competing. Whereas we found out in text 2, they're really not competing. They're too small. So I look at number 2, by asserting that it fails to recognize that routine replenishment of ocean nutrients. They don't say anything about that. By suggesting their own findings help clarify how they're able to compete with larger organisms. Well, that's not happening. And then finally, D, by recommending that more ecologists focus their research on how competition is increased with water density. It's decreased by the water density. It was creating kind of a barrier. So maybe you answered A right away. Maybe you crossed out B, C, and D, but either way, A for sure our answer here. We have another one up here, number 11. Let's move this. And let's see what Amelia's doing here. They want to build a helicopter capable of flying on Mars. Cool. Because its atmosphere is only 1%, so it's going to be much harder to fly. There's much less to kind of push on in the air. It would not provide enough resistance to the rotating blades. For 5 years, the team tested designs in a lab that mimicked these conditions. Okay. They ultimately designed this thing that can fly on Mars because its blades are longer and rotate faster. So by I guess being longer and rotating faster, it's able to get that extra push from the less atmospheric pressure. So okay. According to the text, why would a helicopter built for Earth be unable to fly on Mars? We already know the blades are too long, the blades don't spin fast enough, or the atmosphere is too thin, right? So I'm going into it with you want to absorb enough info from these passages. It's tough if you're less interested in science or technology. You've got to fake it for this test. You've got to have enough interest, like how I'm kind of discussing out loud, where I go through already knowing what answer I'm looking for. So I go through, because Mars and Earth have different atmospheric conditions. So this is almost certainly already correct. But again, with you guys, I'm going to be practicing. So with B, because the blades built for Earth are too large. No, the blades built on Mars are the larger ones, right? Because the gravity on Mars is weaker. It wasn't gravity. It was the atmospheric pressure was different. And because helicopters built for Earth are too small to handle the conditions. So again, it's not necessarily the size of the helicopter, it's specifically the speed of the blades and the size of the blades. So D, a little bit irrelevant. It's going to be A for number 11 here. Good problems so far, really good problems. Let's try to finish a few more. What about number 12 here? A nice short one. Let's see what they ask here. So in West Africa, these people have traditionally been keepers of information about histories and records of important events. Cool. They've often served as teachers and advisors too. New technologies may have changed some aspects of that role today, so I'm imagining maybe like computer, stuff like that, have made it like their roles less significant. But, so we have contrast, but they're still important, right? But they continue to be valid for knowing and protecting their people's stories. Cool. So even, what choice best states the main idea? So we kind of have an idea. They're saying, even though there's been new technology, they're still important. And, you know, I did not read A before I said that. Even though there have been some changes in their role, they continue to preserve their community's histories. So that's already an excellent answer. But again, practice. Let's go through the other ones. Although they have many roles, many of them like teaching best. There is no emphasis on teaching. That's just an aspect of it. When you see words like best, proceed with caution. They have been entertaining the people within their communities for centuries. No, that's just like this really generic, vague answer that's not acknowledging this change that's happening with the improvements in technology. And D, technology can now do some of the things jollies used to be responsible for. So this is a tough one because D is correct, but that's not the main passage. D happens in the middle, and then they conclude with a positive. They conclude with but the jollies still have significance in their communities. D is only an aspect, not the main idea. So A for 12. And then number 13, let's try this one as well. So number 13, a little bit of a longer passage. We'll scroll down to D after. So 13, let's see. We have this physicist. He posited the existence, conjecture, hypothesized this crystal existing entirely of electrons in this honeycomb structure. This so-called Wigner crystal remained largely conjecture. There it is. However, so we already know it's going to be less than conjecture. It's going to be maybe proven in some way. They announced that they had captured an image of one. They trapped electrons between this, causing the electrons to settle. By inserting an ultra-thin sheet of graphene, they have obtained an impression, the first visual confirmation. Okay, so again, remember, you don't need to know everything that's happening in these science experiments, just that you get like a good enough gist like we just did. So what choice? The main idea. There's so many of these main ideas. So researchers have obtained the most definitive evidence to date of the Wigner crystal. So this is just correct. So far, this is correct. Let's go through the rest. Researchers have identified an innovative new method for working with unusual crystalline structures. So this is really good to practice contrasting. Why would I like A more than B? B is this, it sounds good, but it's this vague, non-specific, working with unusual crystalline structures. No, we are specifically working with the Wigner crystal. So remember, always look for the irrelevant answers that just do these general guises. We like A because it's specific to the Wigner crystal. We don't like B because it's not specific. We look at C. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. Graphene is the most important of the components. Graphene is important. They don't say it's the most important. These are danger words right here. And D, it's difficult to acquire an image of it because of its honeycomb structure. It is difficult to acquire a picture of it, but that's not the main idea. They might have mentioned that it was difficult, or you can infer it's difficult, but not that that's our main idea. Our main idea is A. The researchers have obtained the best evidence yet of this crystal. So let's maybe try one more down here. Let's go ahead. Oh, a good one to finish off with, this number 14 here. I don't know where to put the camera. Let's try to make this maybe a little bit smaller. Okay, so that's a little better. I'll scroll down to the text under the graph in a second. So let's see. So we have this graph. We have managers and department leaders. And we have, I just like to try to understand the graph real quick. Average number of individuals reporting directly to CEOs, and it's going up. Managers and department leaders, every year more are reporting to their CEOs. Let's read the text real quick. Considering large sample, they've addressed the number of managers and leaders who reported directly to the CEO. According to the researchers, the findings suggest that across the years analyzed, there was a growing interest among CEOs in connecting with more people. So remember, with these ones, it is, I promise you, it is never good enough to just use the passage or the graph. I have seen numerous of these problems where one will be correct according to the graph, but not match the passage. One will be correct to the passage, not matching the graph. You have to get, this one was an easy one. This one, the text of the passage isn't really taking us in a direction, but some do. Some will take us in a little bit of a more specific or a different direction than the graph, and we have to answer that. This one's easy. This one, I could just use the graph. What best describes data from the graph and supports the conclusion? Well, their conclusion is just the graph in this one. So let's look through it, right? The average number of managers and department leaders reporting directly didn't fluctuate from here to here. It's going up and it's going up, so that's wrong. B, the average number of managers reporting directly to CEOs was highest in this period. Nope, it is highest here. So this one, again, a very nice example of an easier form of the graph one. We'll see the harder ones later on. Let's finish this. The average number of department leaders reporting directly was greater. So department leaders, so that's going to be this guy, was greater than the average number of managers reporting in each of the 3 periods. This is a good one. This is true. Before we answer C, let's look at D. The average number of department leaders reporting to their CEO rose over the 3 periods. Well, that's correct too. So remember when I said that, I actually didn't realize this was one of them. They are allowed to have correct answers according to the graph, but it has to match the conclusion of the passage. So I look at C again. Is this what the passage was saying? That the number of department leaders was greater than the number of managers? No. Just to show you, I'll scroll back down. They said the number of managers and leaders who reported to the CEO was growing. That is it. Just that this group was growing. So when I look at D and I look at C, the reason why it's D, both are correct according to the graph, but the passage said all that mattered was that they were growing. If C was my answer in the passage, they would have mentioned specifically the department leaders were growing more or was greater than the managers reporting. So D for this one, excellent answer. We'll jump back into the next one in some better graph problems on the next section.